Before we dive into one of the most explosive political confrontations in modern American history, make sure to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. You won't want to miss what happens next. Drop a comment below telling us where you're watching from, and if this story gives you chills, smash that like button. Trust me, what you're about to witness will leave you speechless. The National Conference Center in Washington, D.C. had never felt more electric. Under the blazing lights of dozens of television cameras, hundreds of America's most powerful politicians, seasoned journalists, and passionate voters packed into the grand auditorium like spectators at a gladiatorial arena. The air itself seemed to vibrate with anticipation. Something was about to happen, though no one could predict just how seismic it would be. President Donald Trump had just delivered a masterful speech on immigration policy that had the crowd on their feet, applause thundering through the hall like rolling thunder. As the ovation slowly died down, Vice President JD Vance stepped toward the podium, his composed demeanor masking the storm that was about to be unleashed. He was prepared to field questions about jobs and the economy, routine political theater that happened 1,000 times before. But in the front row, a figure sat quietly, his hands folded, his expression unreadable. Former Vice President Mike Pence, invited as an honorary guest, seemed almost out of place among the Trump loyalists surrounding him. His presence felt like a shadow from another era, a reminder of battles fought and loyalties tested. The cameras swept across the audience, capturing every face, every whispered conversation, every subtle shift in body language. Security personnel exchanged glances, their training telling them that something was different about this event. Journalists leaned forward in their seats, pens poised, sensing the kind of story that careers are built on. In the press section, a reporter from Patriot Press rose slowly, his voice cutting through the settling murmur of the crowd. The question he was about to ask would shatter the careful political choreography of the evening and expose wounds that had been festering for years. "Mr. Pence," the journalist called out, his voice carrying to every corner of the hall, "what do you think of JD Vance's role in the Trump administration?" The room fell silent. Every eye turned to the former vice president. The camera zoomed in, capturing the faint smile that played across Pence's lips as he rose from his seat. In that moment, not the seasoned politicians, not the veteran journalists, not even the security detail could have imagined that they were about to witness a political earthquake that would reshape the Republican Party forever. The storm was about to break.
The silence in the National Conference Center stretched like a taut wire, ready to snap at any moment. Mike Pence stood slowly from his front row seat, his movement deliberate and calculated. Every camera in the room swiveled toward him like predators tracking prey. The former vice president's faint smile carried the weight of years of buried resentment, political calculations, and carefully nursed grievances. JD is very loyal to Trump, Pence began, his voice carrying that familiar, measured cadence that had once commanded respect across party lines. But there was something different now, a sharp edge that cut through the political pleasantries like a blade. "But I wonder if he ever makes his own decisions, or if he's just Trump's puppet." The words hit the room like a thunderclap. Whispers erupted from every corner, a low buzz that grew into a rumble of shock and anticipation. Journalists scrambled for their notepads, fingers flying across keyboards, knowing they were witnessing something unprecedented. The bright television lights seemed to burn hotter, casting harsh shadows across faces frozen in disbelief. On the stage, JD Vance stood motionless, not a muscle twitched. Not a flicker of emotion crossed his face. He simply looked at Pence with those piercing eyes, calm, steady, and utterly unafraid. The contrast was striking. Pence animated by his accusation, and Vance, still as stone, letting the moment build its own momentum. But Pence wasn't finished. The years of political exile, the canceled invitations, the whispered criticisms, it all came pouring out now in front of hundreds of witnesses and millions watching live. His tone grew mocking, almost cruel. "JD, You lack the backbone to lead. You're just following Trump around like a lost dog, hoping for scraps of power and influence." The auditorium fell into a suffocating silence. Security personnel exchanged nervous glances, their hands instinctively moving closer to their radios. This had gone far beyond normal political discourse. This was personal, vindictive, and playing out in real time for the entire nation to see. Cameras captured every detail: the way some senators leaned forward in their seats, transfixed, how journalists held their breath, fingers suspended above paper, the way the audience seemed to collectively inhale and hold it, waiting for what would come next. Then JD Vance stepped forward to the microphone. His movement was unhurried, deliberate, like a man who had been preparing for this moment his entire political life. When he spoke, his voice was low but crystal clear, cutting through the tension like a sword through silk. The counterattack was about to begin. JD Vance's hand closed around the microphone with the steadiness of a man who had found his moment in history. The silence in the National Conference Center was so complete that the soft hum of television cameras seemed to roar like jet engines. Every breath was held, every eye fixed on the stage where destiny was about to unfold. When Vance spoke, his voice was low but penetrating, each word carefully chosen and devastatingly precise. "Mike, you call me a puppet for being loyal to Trump," he said, his gaze never leaving Pence's face. "But what do you call yourself for abandoning those you trusted on January 6th? The effect was instantaneous and explosive. The entire hall erupted in thunderous applause that seemed to shake the very foundations of the building. In the corner of the room, a coffee cup slipped from trembling fingers, shattering against the marble floor, the sound somehow audible even above the roar of approval. Mike Pence stood frozen, his face draining of color as if someone had pulled a plug. His mouth opened slightly, but no words came. The man who had once stood a heartbeat away from the presidency now looked like a deer caught in headlights, stunned by the precision of Vance's counterstrike. But Vance wasn't finished. He stepped closer to the microphone, his voice growing stronger, more commanding. "I stand beside a president who puts America first," he continued, his words cutting through the gradually subsiding applause like a knife through butter. "And you ran when things got tough, seeking approval from the very people who once scorned every value you claimed to defend." The audience was transfixed. Journalists frantically scribbled notes, their hands barely able to keep up with the historic moment unfolding before them. A senator in the front row leaned so far forward he nearly fell from his chair, his face a mask of pure astonishment. Vance's voice wasn't loud. He didn't need volume when he had truth on his side. Each syllable was delivered with surgical precision, finding its mark with devastating accuracy. "Vance, you say I only follow orders, but you followed fear. I followed the truth, and unlike you, I will never betray the American people who believed in us." Pence tried to speak, his lips moving silently like a fish gasping for air. The man who had once stood a heartbeat away from the presidency now looked small, diminished, overwhelmed by the weight of his own choices coming back to haunt him. The reckoning had only just begun, and everyone in that room knew they were witnessing the birth of a new political era. The atmosphere in the National Conference Center had transformed from political theater into something resembling a courtroom where judgment was being rendered in real time. Mike Pence stood there, visibly shaken, his political armor cracking under the relentless precision of JD Vance's assault. But what came next would shatter it completely. Vance's voice cut through the tension, each word deliberate and devastating. "You want to talk about loyalty, Mike?" he asked, his tone calm but razor-sharp. "Where were you when the country was in chaos in 2020, when the media distorted the truth, when cities were engulfed in violence? You hid behind speeches while the American people suffered." Pence finally found his voice, though it trembled with desperation. "You don't understand the pressure of leadership. "No, Mike," Vance shot back immediately, his interruption swift and merciless. "You don't understand what it means to stand firm." He looked out at the audience, his gaze sweeping across hundreds of faces hanging on every word. Leadership isn't bowing to applause or dodging responsibility. It's choosing what's right even when it's hard, even when it makes you unpopular, something you once believed in, before you traded your reputation for people who never respected you. The room buzzed with electric energy, but Vance wasn't finished. With theatrical precision, he reached into his jacket and pulled out a thin stack of documents, holding them up for all to see. The camera zoomed in, capturing every detail as gasps rippled through the audience. "Here," Vance said, his voice carrying to every corner of the hall, "is a copy of emails between former Vice President Pence's office and certain Democrat-backed organizations right after January 6th. Before you told the public you were praying for wisdom, you were negotiating speaking fees." The room exploded. Journalists leapt to their feet, cameras flashed like lightning, and a collective gasp escaped from hundreds of throats simultaneously. In the front row, a reporter stood so quickly he knocked over his chair, the crash echoing through the chaos. Pence's eyes widened in horror. "That's classified," he snapped, his composure finally cracking completely. Vance's response was ice-cold and devastating. "Not anymore. The declassified version went public last night. I made sure of it. Transparency isn't betrayal, Mike. Lying with a smile is." As Vance placed the documents on the podium with deliberate ceremony, the back doors of the auditorium suddenly swang open. A hush fell over the crowd as President Donald Trump walked in, his presence commanding immediate attention. Every head turned, every camera pivoted, and the very air seemed to shift as he strode down the center aisle with the confidence of a man reclaiming his kingdom. The political earthquake was about to reach its epicenter. The hours following the CPAC confrontation felt like walking through the aftermath of a political hurricane. As the television cameras were packed away and the crowds dispersed into the Washington, D.C. night, JD Vance found himself in the quiet sanctuary of his office, staring out at the city lights that twinkled like distant stars. The weight of what had transpired hadn't fully settled yet. His phone buzzed constantly, reporters, politicians, supporters, but he ignored them all. Instead, he reached for a simple white envelope that had been placed on his desk, marked only with his name in careful blue ink. Inside, a letter from his father waited, the handwriting slightly shaky, but unmistakably filled with emotion. "Son, I watched today. I've never cried this much, not because you're strong, but because you're kind even when it hurts. That's what real men do. I didn't teach you this when you were young, but today you became the man I always hoped for. You didn't destroy Pence. You exposed him with truth, not hate. I'm proud of you. Dad." Vance's heart tightened as he read the words twice, then a third time. His hand trembled slightly as he folded the letter and pressed it against his chest. Outside his window, Washington continued its eternal dance of power and ambition. But in this moment, none of it mattered as